I have dedicated my professional career to the study and control of arthropods.
Hello, this is a video response to Internet Pastor TV's video, Proof of the Existence of God. Um, I want to talk about this. First of all, I want you to understand, Michael, that your video doesn't prove anything. Okay, there's no proof in that. You're telling a story. That's an anecdote. Okay, I can tell stories too. Doesn't mean they're true. I mean, I try to be as truthful as I can. Um, but it's an anecdote. Proof is something other than that. There's an expression I like. What is it? The plural of anecdote is not evidence. Okay, I think that's something really good to remember. No matter how many stories you tell, it doesn't prove something. But the second thing I want to do is I am watching your video. I'm not convinced that the event that you're describing actually happened in the way that you're telling it. Okay, and so say are you calling me a liar? Well, I'm saying you're exaggerating significantly. All right, and the reason I believe this to be true, again, this is anecdote, so take it with a grain of salt. First of all, your expressions while telling the story, I'm not entirely convinced that you're convinced about the truthfulness of the story. However, that aside, again, that's my opinion. Um, a long time ago, years ago, I had a friend named Ken, and now this guy, had a drug problem, and then or at least I don't know about now. I haven't seen him in over a decade. But he had a drug problem, and then became a born again Christian. And we still associated with him after his conversion. Like he'd come to gatherings and stuff like that. But he less and less, because he felt the need to preach. Okay, so the thing is with it is that he had a story he liked to tell. His conversion story, his testimonial. All of us heard it repeatedly. And this story goes as such. At the height of his drug problem, he was walking down the street, and he'd been apparently had been like going into one of those street evangelism, those like street preachers, and meeting with them, sort of flirting with religion at the time, even though he had some big issues. And what he did, apparently, he was walking down the street, and he was broke and needed money to buy drugs with, and so he prayed for money for drugs. He didn't pray for drug money. He actually prayed for money to clean himself up, but he was sort of scamming God. That was his intention, was he was going to scam God by praying for money, and just in case it came true, he would use the money for drugs, not like he promised. It was this. I'm not entirely sure. I might be misremembering this portion, but there was some reason he was he wasn't convinced. He just prayed, and then immediately looked down and saw $100 bill laying right in the middle of the street, right on downtown Bremerton, right in the street. People walking by. It was just sitting there. Nobody else picking it up. So he reached down and he picked it up. Was going to go buy drugs with it, but something stopped him. So he said, I'll use it tomorrow and buy drugs. And then the next day he couldn't bring himself to do it. And apparently after some amount of time passed, he realized that he needed more in his life. And so he went and met this pastor and fell on his knees, conversion to Christ, born again Christian, and now he's living happily ever after. Okay, that's the story. But when he was telling the story one time at a gathering where I was present, I had to sort of confront him with this point that it's like, remember, Kenny, remember a while ago when you and I were walking down the street in Bremerton and you found a $20 bill and then took us to McDonald's and bought lunch? And he goes, yeah. It's like, well, are you talking about that incident? No, this was a completely separate time. This time it was $100. But you found it in the same spot. Well, yeah. Well, in other words, you're taking the story of finding $20 and turning it into your testimonial conversion story. And he was insistent. He was so offended. No, completely different time. This was long after we stopped hanging out when this happened. It's like, oh, really? The point of it is that he's taking the story and he's embellishing it and he's adding to it. So, Michael, I don't doubt for a second that at some point in time you needed money, and you may have found money at the time you needed money. But I don't believe you found five $20 bills laying on the street, okay, like that, right after you prayed for them, miraculously appearing at your feet. I just don't believe it. There's a couple of reasons why I don't believe it. One thing is that, in the history of the world, things don't spontaneously appear. So right there is a physical impossibility. And one of the things that this kind of brings up is that there's another expression I like. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Okay. What this means is that if you're going to claim something extraordinary, like the existence of this omnipotent, omniscient super being that supersedes all time and space in the universe itself, the creator of all things and the source of all existence, and he's your friend, and you're trying to prove that to me, finding money on the street's not the way to do that. Okay? And here's why. Because people find money on the street all of the time. Okay? Right? I'm sure at this moment, somebody in the world is finding money. Maybe more than one person. Probably every day, hundreds if not thousands of people find money on the street. Whether it be a penny or whether it be $100 bill or whatever, more even. Okay? So it happens a lot. And out of that number of people who find money, a certain percentage of them need money. I mean, it's not just people who already have money that find it. Any number of people find money. Okay? So people that need it find money. And of those, I'm sure there's a percentage of those who prayed to their deity of choice or wished to elves or whatever that they would find money or that they would get money somehow. And so this is happening all of the time. It's not an extraordinary event. Okay, you're at, your whole thing of praying and having it happen at that very second and everything like that, sure, implies an extraordinary event. But what I like to point out is that these kinds of miracles that seem to occur, that people call upon to occur, always seem to be things that happen by themselves anyway. They just happen to happen at a needed time. In other words, somebody prays for a cancer child and the child has spontaneous regression. Well, spontaneous regressions of cancer happen anyways. I mean, it's rare, sure, and I'm sure it is the ultimate joy to the family and parents. But it happens without prayer, or it happens when Muslims pray for it, or Hindus pray for it. It happens when Buddhists pray for it. It happens whenever, atheists wish it would happen. It happens. What would be a miracle, and has never happened, is nobody has ever regrown a hand. This has been pointed out in your comments. Nobody's even regrown a finger or a foot. Okay? Things that can't happen by the laws of biology never happen, which would be, by definition, a miracle. Okay? That would be extraordinary evidence. If one person prayed, one evangelical who lost a limb or lost a foot or lost a finger, prayed, and it was documented to have grown back. Documented, not just I've heard the anecdotes. That would be extraordinary evidence, and there would be millions of people falling to their knees and praying to your God. Okay, millions, guaranteed. So your evidence fails right at that level. It's not extraordinary. Okay, it's not extraordinary in the slightest bit. And just a few seconds left here. I want to comment on a couple of your other videos. First of all, your video about your uncle who died of AIDS, and I'm very sorry to hear that. But that video is despicable. He sounds like a wonderful man, and to bring in that 1950s overbearing mother fallacy crap is just, you ought to be ashamed of yourself to smear his name like that. That's just wretched. The other thing is talking about the sphere in Isaiah. That's circle, and it's been pointed out to you as well. A circle is not a sphere. The Hebrew word, they have a Hebrew word for sphere, ball, and they have a Hebrew word for circle. They're two completely different concepts. So that's false as well. You're ignoring the stuff that's around it as well, about unfolding the heavens like a tent. Anyway, and that's where I'm going to end this now. You need to figure out what evidence is, and then start presenting it. If you have evidence for the existence of God, I'd love to see it.